Hello, as in let me explain why these four movies are hella messed up. There will be spoilers, lots of them, so proceed with caution. Michael is about the mundane daily activities of a dude named Michael, a single dad who's trying to both work and take care of his son. Except that's not his son, that is a child he abducted because Michael is a pedo. This movie doesn't really have a story structure. We see snippets of the life Michael and the kid Wolfgang lead. He keeps Wolfgang in a room down his basement, and from how familiar the child is with his surroundings, we can guess that he's probably been away from home for a long time. But to be honest, even a second spent with someone like Michael is too much time spent with him. The movie never actually shows Wolfgang being abused, but still manages to be insanely uncomfortable. We don't even see them side by side in the same frame when the abuse takes place, which single-handedly proves you don't have to show abuse and violence on screen to horrify the audience. Being given the shot of Michael going into the kid's room and the shot of him washing himself over the sink right after that is all you need to be disturbed. You know what he did to the kid, you don't have to see it, but moreover, the way he unlocks the door so nonchalantly and the way he just casually cleans himself right after shows you how much of a routine this has become for him. And the interesting thing about keeping the abuse scenes from the audience is you start looking deeper into the picture. Investigate every frame to look for signs, which makes your mind wander into the most disturbing places and you start questioning everything. There's a part in the movie where they have a day out at the park and Wolfgang starts vomiting, so your brain runs wild and you start questioning whether he's vomiting because he was becoming ill or something else happened prior to that caused him to have a reaction. The answer doesn't matter at that point either because your mind already thought of the worst thing it could. The fact that this movie is set during Christmas, a time where everyone unites with their family, is also like a sick joke. One of the most haunting scenes, and probably the only scene I'll forever remember from this movie, happens when Wolfgang and his abuser are setting up the Christmas tree. A neighbor's cat ran off and they gave a poster to Michael too. When they're setting up the tree, he tells Wolfgang to go and get the ornaments from the box in the hallway. The next scene we see is Wolfgang sitting on the floor sobbing with the missing cat poster in his hands, because that's the moment he realized he's missing too. Just like that cat is gonna spend Christmas this year away from his family. So throughout the movie, if Wolfgang is gonna be found or not becomes our main concern. When I saw them going out for the first time, I had two scenarios in my head. Things will either go south because Wolfgang will try to make a run for it, then Michael will inevitably get a hold of him and this will cause Wolfgang to be seriously hurt. Or he'll make a run for it, it'll work, and he'll actually save himself. Neither happens, but what does happen is a lot more upsetting to watch. When you're being abused, you think other people can just take a look at your face and recognize you're in danger, that you're in pain. You say inside your head, can't they see how sad I am? How scared I look? How my eyes are filled with tears? Why won't they help me? But people don't see that when they walk past you in the street. And people don't see that when they walk past Wolfgang and Michael, because to them, they just look like a father and son. Wolfgang sees another kid walking with his dad, and the kid doesn't look happy either. He looks upset, just like Wolfgang. And he realizes in that moment that the people won't think anything of his scared eyes, or Michael's firm hand on his shoulder. People won't think anything of him at all. And the reality is we don't know if we have ever walked past a Wolfgang and Michael either. We can never know if that kid we caught staring at us when we were out and about just doing our thing did it because they were curious, judgmental, or because they were asking for help in the only way they knew how. This whole scene packs a strong punch and it does it with no dialogue. In fact, the movie as a whole doesn't have much dialogue, and when it does, you just want to forget about it anyway. One night, Michael stays late to watch a movie. A serial killer is about to murder a woman, and he says something deranged, but it makes Michael laugh. So the next evening, when they're having dinner, he decides to try it on Wolfgang. Barely containing his laughter, he stands up, holds up his knife in his hand, and pulls his penis out of his pants and says, "This is my knife, and this is my dick. Which one should I stick into you?" Not only did this grown man think a disgusting joke he heard from a killer right before he assaulted a woman in a movie was so brilliant, but he also fully thought it would make the 10-year-old boy he keeps in his basement laugh hysterically. And then he has audacity to look bummed out when the kid says, "The knife? without missing a beat. I think this portrays how pedos think of themselves very clearly. They don't think they're hurting the kids, they don't think what they're doing is wrong, they think the kids want to be with them as well. They think that because they have love for their victims and compassion, that makes it normal. That's the reason why Michael thought Wolfgang would laugh with him and this would become like an inside joke between them, but that's not the reality. And facing it irritates Michael. After ruining your day already, I think I should also tell you about the ending, so we'll leave this portion of the video with at least a single drop of hope in our system. One night, Wolfgang boils water in the kettle, and as soon as his abuser opens the door, he throws it in his face. This unfortunately doesn't work because Michael overpowers him, but because his burns are so intense and even his eyes are burned, he decides to drive himself to the hospital, can't see, and has an accident. After his funeral, his mom and brother-in-law go to his house to clean his stuff out. The movie ends with Michael's mom opening the door to Wolfgang's room, but before we can see anything past that point, the screen goes black. The ending is bleak, just like the rest of the movie, because they don't show Wolfgang reuniting with his family, which is messed up. I deserve to see them hug at least once. But I like the ending a lot, because while one son is saved, another is lost. And the mom finds out that she's lost her son a long time ago. She just didn't know. Mourning your son for him to turn out to be a monster, there's nothing you can do about that. There's no way to fix what is done, and you're left with your questions and your grief. Where do you even place your grief after finding that out? Because your grief would become strange to you. Where do you place your anger? How do you deal with the damage your baby caused on someone else's? Is there any way for you to make it okay for them, the family, the kid? I don't think there is. Austria. Bro, it is time to stop creating man-made hordes. Okay, we still haven't recovered from the damage that short man and his stupid fucking mustache cause on humanity and keep causing. They make femboy adult games about him now. It is time to stop. Soft and Quiet is about a lovely woman who goes to brunch with her girlfriends in a church. And what the hell is that? Listen, it's been a while since a movie made my eyes pop out of my head like this. Before this pie reveal happens, we see the same woman carry out a microaggression on a woman of color who works as a janitor at the kindergarten she teaches at. Tells one of her students to go and yell at her because she's not supposed to clean until every kid has left. And then she even lies to the kid's mom, saying he almost slipped and hit his head. That he could have died. Master freaking manipulator. I didn't know much about this movie, obviously, and after what she did, you immediately catch on to the fact that she's racist, but I still didn't really think I was about to watch a movie where she has a whole group of friends and they hold meetings. Like a bunch of fascists. Because they are. Before watching it, just from reading the synopsis, I actually assumed she was gonna get it at the brunch because she's a racist, and the group was gonna be like, oh, what are you racist? How is that? Last time I saw pie and racism in a movie was The Help. This movie is not The Help. At the meeting, they voiced their shitty opinions. One isn't happy how loud people from other races are. Okay. One isn't happy how she lost a position to a Latina, which automatically means it's because she's Latina. One is a generational racist, comes from a white hood-wearing family. One went to prison and was protected by the baldies in there, which formed her worldview in a way. They eventually get kicked out by the pastor, but he doesn't report them or cause a scene, just tells them to leave his church, real soft, real quiet. Things shift when they head to the store one of them owns though. Two Asian sisters, Anne and Lily, come in to buy a bottle of wine. The woman tells the sisters that the store is closed. They say they'll be quick and even get the most expensive wine, but the whole thing goes south when the women block their way and start being real bitches. Even though older one, Anne, just wants to leave, the younger one, Lily, wants to stand up for herself and her sister. We find out that the reason why Anne didn't want to cause any further problems is because the blonde one's brother sexually assaulted her, and he's in prison for it. Lily taunts the blonde one about it as they leave, which makes the racists lose their minds. They end up breaking into Anne and Lily's house to steal their passports because, they're immigrants. Isn't that hilarious? But the sisters return earlier than they assumed, so they get caught. What follows is a humiliation ritual that ends in Lily's death because they force-fed her peanuts, which she was allergic to, and insisted on not using the EpiPen. Then to make it look like a sexual assault so the police don't suspect a woman, the ex-convict uses a carrot on Anne before suffocating her with a pillow. They clean their prints and throw their bodies in the water and leave. But the last second before we get a black screen, Anne rises to the surface. The movie is uncomfortable in a very cheap way. Unless you racist yourself, it is a guarantee for you to be uncomfortable. The camera involves you as the invisible bystander, which is a tactic used to make you panic internally, but that doesn't really bother me because in real life, I wouldn't be just standing there watching it all happen. In real life, I would introduce them to my dear friend Asphalt and roleplay Fast and Furious with them. Oh, you think the color of your skin makes you superior? Boom! You lose skin privileges. Jokes aside, there are things this movie does right, and I'm in my positive era, so I want to show some appreciation. Even though the arguments the characters made felt like I was scrolling on Twitter, the few blink and you miss it moments really helped them have some depth, in my opinion. The only two characters who weren't involved in the crime being the only ones who came from wealth was, I think, a good choice. They're the only ones who have their dream life. The others have failing businesses and relationships. People who can't get their life straight love blaming other people for it as if those people's success somehow barricades them from reaching theirs. That's why racists hate immigrants and say they steal their jobs, even though oftentimes the immigrants are not even applying for the positions they want. I also liked how distinctly different their reactions were to the chaos that they caused. The ex-convict was calm, probably because she's used to things spiraling like this. The shop owner was acting like the girls who are tied up were somehow a threat against her life. The dumb one was losing her shit because she's dumb. And the blondie was losing her shit because she hates not having control over things. The actor who shined the most was her too. She's someone who desires control, which is apparent from her choice of profession. But because of other people's poor decision making, she keeps losing control. Her brother's actions damages her clean and put together act because she believes his guilt, even though she says otherwise. Every time she feels like things around her are spinning out of her control, she tries to gain it back, which causes everything to get worse, and she finds herself in this cycle, and you can see that she's really struggling to keep her image up very easily due to the actress's clear understanding of her character. But with movies like this, I really don't understand what the point is, beyond that racist people be racist and their racism grows when they're around other races because they can be themselves fully. Yeah, it deals with racism, but it doesn't have anything eye-opening to say about it. This is, in my opinion, a very outdated movie. It's outdated right now because of what's happening in the United States, but it was already outdated when it came out in 2022. You can't make anyone believe white women move softly and quietly and no one suspects them of anything when people stopped naming their babies Karen out of fear that she'll come out with a nasty bob and start saying slurs. I think this movie belongs to the times where social media wasn't as popular and we weren't seeing white women be violent and loud every goddamn day online. It's also neither good nor bad enough to attract a huge audience, and it's a jumbled mess most of the time, so how is this gonna change anyone's mind on racism? In a way, the movie tries to put fear into the heart of people who already have that fear because they've experienced aggression like this before. They've dealt with these kind of people before. They've learned how much a shit ton of people hate them and will never see them as equals, and how the world is becoming a safer place for those people and more dangerous for them. I personally don't understand what an anti-racist or a person of color can get from this movie. If this is your first introduction to how racists behave, don't admit that anywhere. Straw Dogs is about a couple, David and Amy, moving to the village she grew up in, where she later gets assaulted by the village men, and this assault awakes a shockingly violent side of David. Except, that's not the movie at all. I don't know who wrote that synopsis for Letterboxd, but they've never watched the movie, somebody gonna get fired. Let me tell you what actually goes down in this movie. David is a mathematician, and just like every man I've ever met who is even slightly good at math, he's a dickhead. He and his wife Amy moves into the village she grew up in because David is working on a project and the change of scenery is supposed to be good for him. This couple sucks. All David wants to do is work on his project, and all Amy does is mope around all day because David wants to work on his project. She's childish and seeks attention from David all the time, and the age gap between the newlywed couple kinda adds to that dynamic. David's treatment of Amy is abysmal, and from the get-go you realize that he's not the guy you're supposed to rally behind here. He doesn't beat her with his hands, but with his words, every chance he gets. It's like marrying someone at least 10 years younger than you, who wants different things from life, will come back to bite you in your ass or something. I don't know. They also move into the house Amy grew up in, which is important because in a way, David is now the head of the house, which used to be Amy's father, which adds on to the theme of the movie, and you'll see why in a bit. Some men from the village are hired to work on their house, building a garage. Since the second they stepped foot in this village, David has been the butt of every joke these guys make, because to them, David is the worst man you can be. A weakling. He's not rough like them. He's an intellectual. He's soft-spoken. He's a submissive puppy to be ordered around. He's not capable of giving orders, which means he has no business being next to beautiful Amy. One of these men also happens to be Amy's ex, Charlie. First few scenes in the movie tells you everything you need to know about these characters to guess where this movie is going. The camera's focus being on Amy's body tells us that she's the object of desire for the village men, but it also shows the difference between her and the other village woman. She's got no bra on, she dresses provocatively, according to the village folk. We also see that she's somewhat of a loudmouth, because when Charlie, who has no shame, gets close to her wanting to rekindle what they had all those years ago, she tells him off. This interaction also tells us that David is a wuss, because even though he sees what's happening through the shop window, he doesn't interfere. He doesn't even ask about it. After the fact, he suggests to her wife that maybe she should start wearing a bra. I mean, I won't say that David is the worst kind of man you can be, because you'll see there are much worse men in the movie, but he definitely isn't the kind of man any sensible woman want to have as a husband, that's for sure. But because of their differences, there's always a weird tension between the village men and David, like a fuse that's about to go off. But David never stands up for anything important in his life, so the fuse never goes off. I mean, these men look at Amy like she's a juicy watermelon, and they are the hungry hippos every chance they get. And girly goes to her husband so he can do something about it, and he just fucking stares. With void eyes. Like, is there a soul behind those eyes, my guy? Are you aware you're sentient? They hang her cat in their shared closet. Let me tell you that again. They hang her motherfucking cat in their closet. And Amy pushes David to confront them about it. Be a man. Go talk to them. Fire them. Whatever the hell you do, but do something. And he does something, of course he does. Who do you think David is? They invite him to go hunting with them. And David giggles. And David twirls his hair. And David kicks his feet. And David says, "Yes, I would love that." I don't understand. Do you want a dick in your ass, David? I don't get it. Like, at this point, you just obviously hate David. The theme is emasculation, we get that. But when there's a threat against your wife, when these men invade your home, your safe place, and hurt something that she loves, you have to speak up. Because these men obviously don't give a fuck about what Amy has to say or what she feels. And if your wife can trust you to protect her from those kind of men, what is the point of you being there? No one is telling David to pick a fight, go head to head with these guys, by the way. Amy doesn't say that. Amy doesn't say go 1v3 their ass. Amy says, you love insulting people so much, 'cause you do it to me a lot. Then go insult them, you Einstein. You keep saying you're the man of the house? Then go be the man of the house. And David realizes that these men are a problem. He's not clueless to the fact, but for some reason his pride as an intellectual man, as a college graduate, doesn't allow him to do anything about it because he sees these men as inferior to him. They're uneducated. They haven't seen the sun shine over anywhere else in the world but that village. So if he does say something to them back, then he's just like them. But there's also a part of him that wants to be accepted by them, to be respected by them. And he sees hunting with them as an opportunity to become their alpha. But these men will never see him the way he sees himself, so they end up tricking David, leaving him there, and secretly going back to the village without him. The assault takes place during this time period by Charlie. It starts with a kiss, and Amy is willing to kiss him, but then Amy makes it clear to him that she doesn't want it to go any further than that. She says no several times, tries to get him off, slaps him, tries to cover herself, but then there comes a point which makes the scene the most uncomfortable essay scene I've ever seen in my life. Amy goes along with it. Amy starts enjoying it. She starts caressing him and hugging him and moaning with pleasure. There are differing views on this scene. Maybe she just gave in to make it less traumatizing for herself, or because she was afraid Charlie would kill her. But listening to a Susan George interview, the actress of Amy, she was supposed to enjoy it. There was no doubt about it. Director Sam Peckinpah and Susan George had a conversation before that scene. It obviously doesn't make it any less unconsensual. You can construct consent after the first no comes and you keep going. It's assault. But the scene also carries an importance into the character of Amy and Charlie. Amy grew up around men like Charlie. Tough men who would protect what is theirs. His house, his work, his family. The village shaped her worldview. It shaped who she is on a fundamental level. And it also shows perfectly why her marriage is already falling apart at the seams. She's a very young woman, about 23, and she liked that David was different than the men she grew up with, so she felt another type of security in his presence. But when push came to shove, and David failed to make her feel safe despite her beggings, she realized that maybe she's made a mistake. The scene also tells a lot about Charlie and his weak masculinity. Because after him, his buddy comes in, with a rifle, waiting for his turn. Charlie only resists for a second, and you can say it was because of the gun, but if it was because of the gun, when the gun was put down, it would have been picked up by Charlie, and his friend would have had his face blown up. Instead, what Charlie does is hold Amy in place. I think this is one of the greatest portrayals of how masculinity can be so fragile and so toxic, because to not disappoint his friend, he was willing to hurt the woman he sees as his belonging. He did it for his friend's approval without giving a thought to Amy. It's ironic because he made fun of David for not having the balls to protect his woman, but his balls popped in a millisecond. I mean, how many times have I seen a man basically pimp out his girlfriend to his friends? Talk about her body in detail. Share intimate photos she sent to him. To these kind of men, having the approval of their buddies is more important than anything. That's why they protect each other even when they commit the most heinous crimes and call it bro code. You're not supposed to agree with neither Charlie and his friends nor David, because the only reason why these men keep their hands away from a woman in this village is if they respect her owner. And the only reason David wanted to be respected by these men was to satisfy his ego. David doesn't know what happened to Amy, so Amy's anger against him in his mind is caused by leaving her alone and going hunting with the people who killed her cat, which is valid. Amy doesn't tell him. To me, this was caused by two reasons. One, because she has lost complete trust in David to protect her, and two, because she enjoyed what Charlie did to her. So now she feels guilty that she cheated on him. It sounds wild, but mind is a wild thing. When it comes to what brings out the violent side of David is, guess what? Another man. He really wants a dick in his ass, just give it to him. There's a man in the village named Henry who is, I'm assuming, the portrayal of someone with autism, and while he's fooling around with a teen girl, they hear her dad and his friends are looking for her. Panicking because they would kill him on the spot, Henry accidentally chokes her out. It is so fascinating how the only women who have opened up their mouths in this movie ended up being forced into submission by men. Henry runs away and David hits him with his car on accident and brings him to his home. Despite Amy telling him she doesn't feel safe with that man in the house because he's got a reputation and begging David to get rid of him, David says, nah. The girl's dad finds out Henry is with David, and the assault that awakes a shockingly violent side in him is the assault that the men carry out on the house to get to Henry. The only reason David protects that stranger man is because of his anger against the man who emasculated him, laughed at him, didn't take him seriously, and ditched him during their buddy time. Even when they start throwing rocks at their windows, releasing rats into their house, or even start shooting at them, he doesn't back down. His wife's life being in danger is less important than him proving to these men that he can stand his ground. He's willing to protect a man who has killed a teen girl for all we know when he hasn't done a damn thing to protect his wife in this entire movie. The man who assaulted her earlier sneaks upstairs to do it again while all of this is happening downstairs. And David still doesn't give a shit about Amy because after getting his triumph and killing all the men, he leaves Amy and drives into the sunset with Henry. Congratulations to the newlywed couple. I hope you stay together forever. Home Alone really ruined a generation of men. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Is about a couple's dance marathon during the Great Depression where the contestants have to be moving at all times for a prize of $1,500. They get a 15-minute break every 2 hours and 6 meals throughout the day. There's also a thing called the Derby where they have to run in circles for 10 whole minutes and the last 3 couples get eliminated. Among the contestants, there are folks who are older in age, there's a pregnant woman who's there fighting tooth and nail, there's a Hollywood actress whose dream is to make it big, and there's also Jane Fonda, another actress who has seemingly no dreams. Throughout the movie, we watch these people break one by one. The exhaustion gets some of them, some give up because they get job opportunities, some actually die. But their deaths are covered up by the ones who are running the show, and they are running a show by all means. This whole thing is a spectacle to be enjoyed by the miserable people sitting in their home, desperate to involve themselves in someone else's story so do not have to live it their own for a while, and for the wealthy to be entertained and throw coins at the poor's heads if they perform good enough for their taste. At first glance, this is an amazing opportunity for those people because $1,500 was a whole year's teacher's salary at the time, but as the movie progresses, the rotten nature of human suffering as entertainment makes itself more and more clear. From the juxtaposition of the cheery audience and the contestants who look like they're in the brink of death, to the game host's quickness in coming up with a lie to cover the fact that a man has just dropped dead, and the thin veil being removed in front of our eyes when we learn that whoever wins won't even get all the money they were promised in the first place, because the food they ate, the water they drank, the phone calls they made, and even the soap they used to clean themselves with will be cut from their prize, leaving them with next to nothing. It is a horrifying watch. But possibly the thing that horrified me the most is how much I enjoyed it myself. Despite not agreeing with the contest happening, I really wanted to know who was gonna win. And when the movie ended without the winner could be announced, I find myself annoyed. But if I'm being honest, I was entertained by more cruel spectacles. Fear Factor was my favorite reality TV as a kid, and they made you get into a coffin with like roaches in that show. It doesn't get any worse than that. And today, so many of us watch shows where desperate people are being taken advantage of and served to us as entertainment when the people who run the show make bank. The prize given to the winner doesn't even come close to how much money the showrunners make, and we name them philanthropists. With every round the horses make at the Derby, it's as if the movie resembles life more and more. The people who are providing the entertainment are getting nothing in return, and their work just makes the rich richer, and most of them don't even realize that the system is corrupt and not in their favor. They realize it when they lose their ability to interact genuinely with others, when they lose their empathy, when they are removed from their humanity and become a cog in the machine that runs to provide a nicer cushion for the wealthy to sit on. And when they do realize it, it's always too late, because change doesn't come easy, and it certainly doesn't help that they're too broken inside to change their lives around, let alone the system that broke them. So, they off themselves, when the only thing life gives them becomes misery, and the only branch left to grab onto gets cut off right in front of them. And the man holding the chainsaw gets others to cheer in glee at their fall, and the funny thing is, it wasn't even him who bought the chainsaw. It was just handed to him as an opportunity, and he thought it's better to ride the horse than to become it. Unfortunately, there's always going to be someone who will turn human suffering and humiliation into entertainment. And unfortunately, again, there's always going to be us who will tune into it. Because at the end of the day, the people who pull up their phones to record someone who's going through some rough shit and the rest to make the videos go viral on social media are the same people who used to watch public executions and participate in public humiliations, because the system that encourages and exploits has been there forever. We always talk about losing our humanity, but maybe we never had it to begin with.